By the spring of 1945, the United States had been fighting Japan for over 3 years. Island by island, beach by beach, the Allied forces had pushed westward. Across the Pacific, from Guadalcanal to Tarawa, from Saipan to Iwo Jima. Each battle had been brutal. Each battle had claimed thousands of lives. But nothing in 3 years of Pacific warfare, nothing, had prepared the American military for what was about to happen on a small island chain 340 miles from the Japanese mainland. In 82 days of fighting, 250,000 human beings would die on this island. 110,000 Japanese soldiers. 100,000 or more Okinawan civilians, 1 out of every 3 people who called this place home, and 12,520 Americans. The cost of this battle so shocked President Harry S. Truman that it would drive him toward the most consequential military decision in human history. This is the story of Okinawa, the last battle before the bomb. To understand why Okinawa mattered, you need to look at a map. By early 1945, American B-29 superfortresses were already bombing Japan from the Mariana Islands, Saipan, Tinian, Guam, 1,500 miles to the southeast. But those bombing runs were long and dangerous. The aircraft had no fighter escort. Damaged planes had nowhere to land. Iwo Jima, captured in March 1945 at terrible cost, had provided one emergency airfield. But to truly strangle Japan from the air, to provide fighter cover, to launch ground invasions of the home islands, the United States needed Okinawa. Just 340 miles from Kyushu, Japan's southernmost main island, Okinawa, would be the final platform for the invasion that every military planner assumed was coming. Operation Iceberg was the largest American amphibious assault in the Pacific. Over 1,500 ships, 500,000 personnel, including sailors, pilots, Marines, and soldiers. The U.S. 10th Army, commanded by Lieutenant General Simon Bolivar Buckner, Jr., would put 8 full divisions ashore, 4 Army and 4 Marine. The landing force alone numbered more than 180,000 troops. Supporting them was the most powerful naval fleet ever assembled, including 40 aircraft carriers, 18 battleships, and hundreds of destroyers and cruisers. The firepower available to the attacking forces was virtually unlimited. What they were about to face, however, would make raw firepower nearly useless. Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima was one of Japan's most respected combat commanders. A calm, methodical strategist, he had learned from the failures at Iwo Jima and the Marianas. He would not waste his men in suicidal banzai charges. He would not try to stop the Americans at the beach. Instead, Ushijima prepared Okinawa for the longest, costliest, most grinding battle Japan could deliver. Working with his brilliant but aggressive chief of staff, General Isamu Cho, Ushijima directed the construction of an elaborate 3-layered defensive system. Across the southern third of the island, miles of interconnected tunnels bored through limestone ridges, hundreds of caves converted into fortified firing positions. Artillery and mortars registered precisely on every piece of open ground. Every ridgeline, every hill, every ravine, turned into a killing zone. His strategy was simple and brutal. Let the Americans land, let them advance. Then bleed them white on the ridges. Okinawa itself was unlike any island the Americans had fought for before. 64 miles long, 7 miles wide in places, it was home to 500,000 Okinawan civilians, a distinct people with their own language, culture, and ancient history dating back centuries before Japan had absorbed them. The island's northern 2/3 were rugged jungle-covered hills, difficult, but not fortified. The southern third was a landscape of stone ridges, terraced fields, and small villages, perfect terrain for Ushijima's layered defense. At the heart of that southern fortress stood Shuri Castle, a 14th-century Ryukyuan citadel that had survived wars and typhoons for 600 years. Beneath it, Ushijima had carved his command post more than 150 feet underground. It was the most heavily defended piece of real estate in the Pacific. April 1st, 1945. Easter Sunday. In the United States, families attended church services, children hunted for Easter eggs. On a reef-lined beach on Okinawa, 60,000 American soldiers and Marines climbed into landing craft and headed for shore. They expected a bloodbath. After Tarawa, after Paliliu, after Iwo Jima, every man in every boat braced himself for the wall of machine gun fire that would greet them at the waterline. At 8:30 in the morning, the naval bombardment ceased. 1,600 carrier aircraft swept the beaches. At exactly 8:32, the first wave of landing craft touched sand. The men climbed out of their boats and walked up the beach. No enemy fire. No machine guns. No artillery. Just silence and the sound of wind off the Pacific. Within 90 minutes, 60,000 men were ashore. Marines and soldiers captured 2 Japanese airfields, Yontan and Kadena, virtually intact. The afternoon, joking soldiers sent a telegram back to the fleet. Have secured the beachhead. All quiet on the Western Front. Send beer. The men laughed. The veterans did not. They had seen this before. Or rather, they had seen what came after an empty beach. The Japanese hadn't disappeared. They were waiting. In their tunnels, on their ridges, crouched in their prepared positions in the southern hills. Watching. And counting. On April 7th, just 6 days into the battle, the Japanese Navy made one final, desperate attempt to influence the fighting. The Yamato, the largest battleship ever built, displaced 73,000 tons and carried 9 18-inch guns capable of firing shells the size of small cars. Japan sent her toward Okinawa on a one-way mission, a kamikaze mission for an entire battleship. She carried fuel for the voyage to Okinawa, but not for the return trip. The plan was to run herself aground on the beach and use her massive guns as fixed artillery. Until destroyed. She never got there. 400 American carrier aircraft intercepted the Yamato 130 miles northeast of Okinawa. They hit her with 12 aerial torpedoes and 7 bomb strikes. At 2:23 in the afternoon, her forward ammunition magazine exploded. The Yamato sank in 15 minutes, taking 2,498 of her 2,700 crew members to the bottom of the East China Sea. Japan's surface navy was finished, while the Army's Ziv Corps turned south toward Ushijima's waiting fortifications. The 3 Marine Amphibious Corps swept north. The jungle hills of northern Okinawa were wild and steep, but the Japanese defenders there were few. The 6th Marine Division covered 65 miles in 2 weeks against scattered resistance. By April 18th, just 17 days after landing, the northern two-thirds of Okinawa was secured. Marines had suffered fewer than 1,000 casualties. Then they turned south, and the easy part was over. April 8, 1945. The Army's 96th Infantry Division advanced toward a ridge called Kakazu, one of the outer bastions of Ushijima's defensive network. What happened that morning changed every American commander's understanding of what they were fighting. 2 companies crossed an open valley and climbed Kakazu Ridge. When they reached the top, the Japanese opened fire from 3 sides simultaneously, from caves and tunnels the Americans hadn't even known existed. Mortars, machine guns, and artillery rained down. Of the 2 companies that assaulted, only a fraction came back down the hill. A second assault on April 12th was repulsed. A third on April 14th, again repulsed. 3 separate attacks on the same ridge, and the Americans couldn't hold it. The battle for Kakazu Ridge alone cost the 96th Division over 1,100 casualties in 10 days. And Kakazu was just the first layer of what lay ahead. General Ushijima's Shuri Line was a masterpiece of defensive engineering, and it ran completely east to west across the island, with no way around it. The terrain itself was the weapon. Every ridge was connected to the next by tunnels. When Americans took one position with overwhelming force, the Japanese simply disappeared underground, re-emerged behind the attackers, and opened fire. They couldn't be bombed out, the limestone absorbed everything. They couldn't be flanked, the terrain was too constricted. They had to be killed, individually, in every cave and tunnel, with flamethrowers and hand grenades and bayonets. Anchoring the entire system was Shuri Castle, a 600-year-old Ryukyuan fortress in the center of the island. 150 feet below it, General Ushijima ran the battle from his underground command post, connected by tunnels to positions all across the front. On April 18th, the same day the Northern Campaign ended, America lost something irreplaceable. Ernie Pyle was the most beloved war correspondent of World War II. For 3 years he had traveled with the ordinary GI, in North Africa, in Italy, in France, and across the Pacific, writing about the humor and humanity and exhaustion of the common soldier. 12 million Americans read his column every day. Presidents and privates alike respected him. On the tiny island of Ie-Shima, just off Okinawa's western coast, Pyle was riding in a jeep when a Japanese machine gun opened fire. He dove into a ditch. Then he lifted his head to check on the other men. A single bullet struck his left temple. He was 44 years old. When the men who found him saw that Ernie Pyle was gone, grown men who had survived years of combat sat down in the dirt and wept. Private First Class Desmond Doss did not carry a weapon. He never had, and he never would. A Seventh-day Adventist from Lynchburg, Virginia, Doss had refused on religious grounds to take a human life. But he had also refused to avoid service. He believed he could serve his country as a medic without violating his faith. His fellow soldiers had mocked him, threatened him, tried to have him discharged. The army tried to court-martial him twice. He refused to quit. Now, in late April and May of 1945, Corporal Desmond Doss was assigned to the 77th Infantry Division, ordered to assault the Maeda Escarpment, a brutal 350-foot limestone cliff the men called Hacksaw Ridge. The top was Japanese territory, fortified and deadly. Every assault was driven back. On the night of May 5th, the Americans on top of the ridge were hit by a massive Japanese counterattack. Dozens of men lay wounded in the open. The order came to withdraw, to pull back down the cliff and leave the wounded behind. Desmond Doss didn't go down. Alone, under constant fire, without a weapon, he dragged wounded men to the cliff edge one by one and lowered them down on a rope. 4 hours he worked. Each time he pulled someone to safety, he prayed, "Lord, let me get just one more." When it was over, he had saved 75 men. On October 12, 1945, Desmond Doss became the first conscientious objector in American history to receive the Medal of Honor. President Truman, who presented it, told him, "I consider this a greater honor than being president." On the western side of the line, the 6th Marine Division faced a different kind of trap. Sugarloaf Hill looked like nothing, a modest, curving rise maybe 60 feet high. But Sugarloaf was part of a 3-hill complex, mutually supporting, with interlocking fields of fire. You couldn't take one without taking all 3. And you couldn't take all 3 simultaneously with any force that existed. From May 12th to May 18th, the 6th Marine Division threw itself at Sugarloaf Hill 11 times. 11 separate assaults. Marines would reach the top, hold for a few hours, take casualties they couldn't sustain, and be driven back down. In 7 days of fighting for a 60-foot hill, the 6th Marine Division suffered more than 2,000 casualties. Some companies that had landed with 235 men were down to fewer than 30 by the time Sugarloaf was finally taken. A Marine lieutenant who survived later said, "I never want to see anything like that again. Not in this life or any other." In mid-May, the rains came. Not gentle Pacific showers. Torrential, relentless tropical rains that turned the limestone ridges into waterfalls and the valleys into knee-deep swamps of mud. For 3 weeks, the May rains slowed the American advance to a crawl. The terrain that had been difficult became nearly impossible. Tanks sank. Supply lines broke. Men fought in water-filled foxholes for ground measured in yards. In the first 7 weeks after landing, the 10th Army advanced only 4 miles into the Shuri Line. 4 miles of ground had cost over 20,000 American casualties. Kamikaze means divine wind, a reference to the typhoons that destroyed the Mongol invasion fleets in the 13th century. Now Japan was deploying a human version, pilots who flew their aircraft directly into American ships, their bodies becoming the warhead. At Okinawa, the kamikazes were deployed in the largest coordinated attacks of the war, mass strikes called kikusui, or floating chrysanthemums. Over the 82-day battle, Japan launched more than 1,900 kamikaze sorties. What they could not win with strategy or conventional warfare, they would answer with sacrifice. To protect the invasion fleet, the Navy established a ring of radar picket stations around Okinawa, destroyers positioned far out at sea to detect incoming attacks early enough to give warning. It was necessary work. It was also a death sentence. The kamikazes zeroed in on the picket ships first. Day after day, the destroyers on the outer ring absorbed the full force of Japan's divine wind. Their crews, manned guns around the clock, slept in shifts of minutes, fought off attacks alone while the larger fleet sheltered behind them. The toll was catastrophic. 34 ships sunk, 368 damaged, 4,907 American sailors killed, more than 40% of all U.S. deaths at Okinawa, by men they never saw until the last seconds of the attack. On April 16, 1945, a single American destroyer faced what seemed like the entire might of Japan's kamikaze force. The USS Laffey, destroyer DD-724, was on radar picket duty when 22 Japanese aircraft, a combination of conventional bombers and kamikazes, concentrated their entire attack on her alone. For 80 minutes, the Laffey fought off wave after wave. 6 kamikaze aircraft struck her. 4 bombs hit her. 32 men were killed, 71 wounded. Her guns never stopped firing. Her engines never stopped turning. The USS Laffey survived. Her crew later nicknamed her the ship that would not die. She is preserved today in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, still carrying the scars of that day. In the statistics of the Battle of Okinawa, it is easy to overlook the people who did not choose to be there at all. 500,000 Okinawans lived on this island. They were not Japanese in the fullest sense. They had their own language, their own traditions, their own identity. Japan had formally annexed them only 70 years earlier. Now they were caught between 2 massive industrial war machines. Japanese soldiers had been telling Okinawan civilians for months, if the Americans come, they will rape the women and torture the men. Death is better than capture. Many Okinawans believed them. On Zamami Island, off Okinawa's western coast, American troops landed on March 26. Within hours, 140 Okinawan civilians had gathered in a valley. Japanese soldiers had given the men grenades. Entire families, grandparents, parents, children, died together rather than face American capture. Across Okinawa, historians estimate that thousands of civilians died this way. The Japanese military called it patriotic death. Many survivors, interviewed decades later, described it differently: fear, confusion, and the terrible pressure of soldiers with weapons. Between 100,000 and 150,000 Okinawan civilians died during the battle, 1 out of every 3 people on the island. Many by Japanese artillery and American bombardment. Many by their own hands, coerced or convinced. When the fighting ended, 80,000 Okinawan civilians emerged from the caves. They had survived. What they found waiting for them was not the brutality they had been promised, but American soldiers offering food, water, and medical care. By late May, General Ushijima made the decision his defending doctrine dreaded. He ordered a withdrawal from the Shuri line. 50,000 of his best troops were dead. His underground fortress was being burned out room by room. On May 29th, Marines of the 1st Division entered Shuri Castle. 600 years of Ryukyuan history lay in ruins around them. Japan's main defensive line had broken, but Ushijima still had 30,000 troops and one final defensive position. In the far south, the battle was not over. On June 18, 1945, with only days of fighting remaining, Lieutenant General Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr. visited a forward observation post of the 8th Marines. A Japanese artillery battery spotted the unusual concentration of officers and opened fire. A shell struck a nearby coral outcropping, and a fragment hit General Buckner in the chest. He was dead within 10 minutes. Simon Bolivar Buckner Jr. was the highest-ranking American officer killed by enemy fire in World War II. He was 58 years old. The battle he had commanded for 82 days would be over in 4 more. By June 21st, the Japanese 32nd Army had been pushed to the southernmost limestone cliffs of Okinawa. There was nowhere left to go. The Pacific Ocean stretched out behind them. On June 22nd, General Ushijima and his Chief of Staff, General Cho, put on their dress uniforms, shared a final meal, and committed ritual suicide on a cliff ledge overlooking the sea. Ushijima's last message to his troops: "Do your best until the end." That same day, the 10th Army announced Okinawa secured. 7,400 Japanese soldiers had surrendered, the most in the entire Pacific War. Over 110,000 had died. Harry S. Truman had become president on April 12, 1945, just 11 days after the Okinawa landings. He received the casualty reports every day. Every day, more thousands of names. When the battle ended in late June, the totals were staggering: 49,151 American casualties in 82 days. 12,520 dead or missing. The Navy had lost 4,907 sailors, more than at Pearl Harbor. Now his military planners laid Operation Downfall on his desk, the invasion of the Japanese home islands. 2 phases: Operation Olympic against Kyushu in November 1945, followed by Operation Coronet against Honshu in March 1946. The casualty projections were extraordinary. General MacArthur estimated 95,000 American casualties for Kyushu alone in 90 days, and that was considered optimistic. Other estimates ranged from 250,000 to over 1 million American dead and wounded. The Japanese home islands had more than twice the defenders Okinawa had, and Okinawa's civilian population had almost been wiped out. Truman later wrote that he saw the Okinawa casualty reports as a preview of what invading Japan itself would cost. "I could not help but think of the soldier and sailor casualties," he wrote. The thought of another Okinawa, closer to Japan, was simply too much to contemplate. On August 6, 1945, the B-29 Enola Gay dropped a single atomic bomb on Hiroshima. On August 9, a second bomb fell on Nagasaki. On August 15, Japan announced its surrender. Whether the bombs were morally justified remains one of the most debated questions in American history. What is not debated is the direct line that runs from the beaches of Okinawa to the decision Truman made. Today, at the southernmost tip of Okinawa where the last defenders died, stands the cornerstone of peace. Its black granite panels curve toward the Pacific, and engraved in them are 240,734 names: Americans, Japanese, Okinawans, Koreans, British, every name of every person, from every nation, who died in the Battle of Okinawa. Kadena Air Base, built on the airfields captured in the first hours of the battle, remains today one of the largest American military installations in the world. A lasting mark of the day, 60,000 Americans came ashore on a Sunday morning and changed the course of history. 80 years later, Okinawa lives. Its people rebuilt. Its culture survived. And somewhere on those southern ridges where American boys and Okinawan families and Japanese soldiers all died together, the hibiscus blooms every year, red and bright and permanent, in the soil of the most costly island battle in American history. If this video helped you understand history a little deeper, or made you see these moments in a new way, make sure to leave a like thumbs up. It truly supports the channel and helps bring more such stories to life. Speech Balloon, share your thoughts in the comments. Which moment impacted you the most? Or what historical event would you like me to cover next? Bell, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss future videos on history, war stories, and untold events that shaped our world. Thank you for watching till the end. Remember, history is not just about the past, it's a lesson for the future. See you in the next video.